Anita returned a few minutes later and lifted his legs to dress him. She quickly slipped a clean pair of training pants over his feet and pulled them down over his thighs. Just before she lifted his legs again to tug the pants over his bottom, Anita laid a thick white pad on top of his crotch. Howard was surprised by the addition to his underwear and asked as she pulled his pants over his bottom, "What that?" Anita chuckled and said as she tucked the padding down between his legs and arranged his pants so he wouldn't leak, "It's a diaper doubler, honey bunch. Mommy can't have you making puddles all over her carpet. It will double the absorbency of your training pants. If you continue to make messes on the floor like you did in the kitchen, Mommy will have no choice but to put you in real diapers. Do you understand, sweetheart?" Howard looked at Anita morosely and slowly nodded his understanding. Short of putting him in diapers in front of Fran, Anita had managed to find the most humiliating garment she could dress him in before her friend. Why was she doing this to him? Anita seemed to be going out of her way to shame him. Fran smirked as she looked on at the scene of Howard's humiliation being played out in front of her. Fran knew that the step from requiring extra padding in his training pants to being forced back into diapers was a short one. It wouldn't be long before Howie was crawling about the floor dressed in nothing but a baby's didies. Once Anita had taken that path, Howie would be drinking from baby bottles within a day or two. Little boys had no business dictating their care to their mommies and sometimes had to be reminded who made the decisions in the house. Poor little Howie would soon find himself re-experiencing the delights of babyhood when Anita finally decided to put him in his place. Good, she thought to herself, if it were me, I'd rather have a clinging, cringing diapered tot than have a little boy who's too big for his britches. I wouldn't put up with his tantrums for a minute. It won't be long before this little hellion is turned into a whimpering mama's boy in diapers. Then he won't even think of arguing with his mommy. Anita lifted Howard bodily from the bed and stood him at its side. Then she folded down the comforter and patted the bed, saying, "Come on and hop in bed, sweetheart. It's time for your nap." "No, Mama. Too early," Howard whined. "Time to go nap, honey bunch," Anita said firmly. "No nap, Mama." "Not sweepy," Howard pleaded. "Does Howie want a spanking?" Anita asked imperiously. Howard reluctantly got into the youth bed and allowed himself to be tucked in for his nap. There wasn't any point in arguing with Anita. If he continued his recalcitrant behavior, Anita would carry out her threat and he'd find himself being spanked in front of a stranger. Once he had been reduced to a weeping, red-bottomed tot, she'd still put him down for his nap. Anita kissed him on his forehead and closed the curtains so he could sleep. Then the two women left the room, closing the door behind them. Howard wept at his weakness for a few minutes and soon fell fast asleep. When Anita woke him later, Fran was gone. His training pants were soaked, even though she had put a diaper doubler inside the crotch. Sunday passed quickly with him playing on the floor in his training pants until dinner. Once he had eaten, Anita took him to the bathroom and bathed him, then took him into his bedroom and put him into a clean pair of training pants with another diaper doubler tucked inside. The next morning Anita changed his wet panties and gave him his breakfast as usual. Howard hated the unsightly bulge the diaper doubler made in the front of his training pants, but he had to admit that they worked as planned. Unless he totally emptied his bladder, their absorbency was more than enough to take care of any problems that should happen while he was at the daycare center. When they got to the daycare, Howard was taken by the hand and led to the toddler area of the center. The attendant plopped Howard down on his bottom and unceremoniously handed him his blankie and his ducky. Then she left to attend to the other children. After about 10 minutes of staring at the wall, Howard decided that he had to do something to occupy himself or he would go mad with boredom. He tottered over to the building blocks he had seen in the corner and began constructing a grand edifice for his amusement. After an hour of play, the attendants came and led him over to a group of toddler-sized plastic tables and chairs. They sat him down next to the other children and set a paper plate of carrot sticks and a tiny wax cup of milk before him. Howard had no choice but to eat the hated vegetables on his plate. If Anita heard from the workers that he had refused to eat, she would spank him until he couldn't sit for a week. At least that was what she had promised that morning before they left the house. He crunched and munched on the foul veg until the plate was empty, then he downed the milk in a single draught. The attendant who was supervising the mid-morning snack replaced his cup with a full one immediately. Howard drank that one as well to get the disgusting white fluid out of his sight as quickly as possible. He was utterly dismayed when she replaced the cup again and he was forced to drink a third cup of milk. That time, however, he drank more slowly as if he wasn't thirsty anymore. The attendant looked satisfied and looked for other toddlers to bedevil with her brew. When the other children had finished their snacks, he was allowed to return to the building blocks until it was time for a nap. He was standing up, looking at his wooden creation when an attendant came to get him. The attendant said it was time to go night-night and he turned to allow her to lead him to the sleeping area. When she saw him, she let out a loud "oh" and hauled him to the dressing area without a further word. Howard was mortified to discover that he had wet his pants so thoroughly that the front of his overalls were completely soaked. He was stripped down to his t-shirt in short order and was forced to stand and wait wearing only his t-shirt, shoes, and socks while they hunted down his spare training pants. When the attendant returned, she made him sit on the table while she worked his panties over his shoes and socks. In so doing, she discovered that he had soaked his socks and shoes with pee as well. She shucked him out of his shoes immediately and ripped off his socks to toss them on the pile of pee-sodden overalls. Then she pulled the clean pair of padded panties up his legs and over his bottom before taking him back to lie on his assigned mat with his blankie and ducky. Howard was so ashamed of his infantile behavior that he wept as he lay on the mat. The workers saw his tears but said nothing to him. They were used to having toddlers cry for their mommies. It happened all the time. They knew if they left the little ones alone, they would get over missing their mommies an hour or so. After about 10 minutes, Howard closed his eyes and fell fast asleep.